Are you ready?
Oh, he's free. And he broke another tackle.
Think you could tell us what to do?
He's got the ball. No! Kansas State stops him.
You think that you're better?
And now here comes the run back.
Break it down!
Welcome to the College Football X with your hosts, John Nelson, John Wilkerson, and Phil Cantor.
Hello, everybody. You are back with another week of the College Football X marks the spot. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Podcast where we talk about everything college football. And guys, this week there's a lot to talk about, from Conference Championship Week to coaches playing musical chairs as the carousel kicks into full gear. We know who's going to be in the college football playoff, and we need to probably explain why those teams are in the college football playoff. All that more through this episode here, but we're going to start off in the first half of the show talking about Conference Championship Weekend, where things got off to a bit of a unpredictable start, for lack of a better way to put it, guys. Utah versus USC. Utah laying the smackdown on the basically defenseless Trojans, 47-24, knocking USC out of what would everybody assumed to be their last playoff berth. Did you get a chance to watch that game? That was about as thorough as a beating as I have seen in some time.
Well, it kind of you kind of saw it coming in the midway through the first half, because Utah had punched Southern Cal in the mouth a few times and were dominating the line of scrimmage, and then it just went full boat race in the second half. Yeah, it was impressive. Utah's offense, love that quarterback of theirs. Tough, hard-nosed kid.
Did you see that hit that he took in the second quarter?
Yeah, when he knocked his helmet off, that was. And he got right back up. I mean, he was fine. And it was a legal hit. Shoulder right to the other shoulder. It just snowballed for the Utes, and Caleb Williams could not get any kind of burst at all. Yeah, and he couldn't even set and throw off his back foot. That really hurt Southern Cal's chances. He wasn't mobile at all, and it just kind of went to heck from there for the Trojans. And you just saw the deflation of that team as the game progressed. That Utah was just owning them, and they had no answers.
John, have you ever seen a worse performance tackling than what USC tried to do to Utah's running backs?
Oh, yeah. I've seen several, but I think it goes to a larger point where I think that fundamentals of tackling, I think they're lost on this current generation for whatever reason. I mean, the notion of tackling, wrapping
I don't know about the generation. USC, yeah. Everybody, not as much.
I've seen more poor tackles, or more poor attempts at tackles, or more just giving up on a tackle or sitting there trying to shoulder somebody off instead of actually wrap in the last 10 years than I've probably seen in the remainder of that time leading up to the last 10 years. I think that tackling has become a lost art regardless. And I think that it's something that really needs to be addressed at the college level. It's like, look, it's okay to actually wrap your arms around someone and tackle them to keep them from doing what's going on, instead of you getting 1,100 yards of offense from one end of the field down to the other and trying to outscore folks. There's nothing wrong with fundamentals of tackling, but it seems to be lost on folks these days.
Well, to me, it's not so much the tackling as the no pursuit at all. I mean, you get a Southern Cal defender slowing a guy down, but where was the pursuit? They were just kind of jogging in place, it seemed like. To me, it reminded me kind of what Oklahoma was like the last couple of years on defense, when they were just outscoring people. Yeah. And it's the same defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch.
Same head coach too.
Yeah. Do you need to look deeper into maybe the problem is the defensive coordinator and defensive staff? I don't think Lincoln Riley is going to go ahead and pull the trigger on Grinch, because those two have been together for a long time, and Lincoln Riley has full trust in Alex Grinch. But at the same time, you got to wonder, okay, you saw this at Oklahoma, different set of players at USC, and you've got the same issue.
Can you say the Grinch stole Christmas by costing USC a shot at the college football playoff with bad defensive coaching?
All right, John. Yeah. You need to do that, Phil. You're fired on that one.
Man, wow.
The Grinch ruined Christmas.
Sorry,
is what he did for Trojan
That
fans.
was just percolating in my brain, and I had to get it out.
Should have kept it in. Grinch ruined the A block is what happened.
All right. Thanks for joining us. That's the show.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Poor USC. Sometimes the jokes just kind of write themselves. They will be in the New Year's Six, but a missed opportunity there for the Trojans. Moving on to Saturday afternoon's games, a slew of conference championship games. The first game of the day, arguably the most competitive one.
The MAC?
Of the bunch. No, I'm talking about TCU and Kansas State. Which I don't know if you got to see any of that game, but that was a thing.
Yeah, it was a thing.
Well, K-State did an excellent job getting penetration into Max Duggar or Max Dugan. It was really impressive, the game plan, the defensive game plan by the Wildcats on TCU. TCU's receivers, to me, are fantastic, and they made some great catches, but Max Dugan just didn't have any chance, any clear vision, and didn't have a chance to set himself. He was throwing on his back foot, it seemed like, the whole time, and he took some punishment as well. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the Heisman a little later, but we saw two Heisman candidates really struggle in their conference championship games, and I'm just wondering what effect that's going to have. Of course, we'll see who the finalists are this week.
Stetson Bennett, front and center, brother.
We're going to see where that affected their placement, because going into this, I thought Caleb Williams had it won, to be honest with you. But now I'm not so sure.
Dugan's, to his credit, I don't know if you got to see that final drive in regulation in that game.
Yeah.
He single-handedly willed them down the field. Running play after running play, because he didn't have anybody to throw the ball to. And he ran, every play ended up being him scrambling or him on a designed run. And he ended up basically accounted for 95-yard rushing on that drive alone, even though it was an 80-yard drive because of a penalty. The guy was so exhausted, they had to help him out of the end zone after he scored that touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, he's the heart and soul of that team. He just made himself into an NFL draft number one or first-round pick. And I think he's going to have a pretty good NFL career, but that's a tough kid. I mean, he's that glue of TCU. And, luckily he's going to get a chance to kind of redeem himself. He's going to be in the national spotlight. We'll talk about that a little later. But I just think it was interesting how two really blue-collar teams, Utah and Kansas State, when you put them in a one-game championship scenario, came through in one dominating fashion. One, Kansas State, I thought they played their line kind of outworked TCU's line. It's just TCU had some outstanding skill players that kind of canceled that out. But K-State, they proved something, and they won the Big 12 championship. And kind of a bigger issue here is this is why you expand the playoff, because we all are fans of the NCAA tournament, that men's basketball tournament. We know that the automatic bid goes to the conference champion and their tournament. Well, this is the same thing. Kansas State wins the Big 12, but they're not going to be able to go to the playoff and play for a national championship because there's no automatic bids into that. So it's I guess it'd be kind of disappointing if you're a K-State follower, but you're going to go to a New Year's Six bowl, and that's somewhat of a consolation prize. But to me, this is the big reason why you need to expand. They've expanded the playoff to 12 because of the Utahs and the Kansas States, who may have lost some close games earlier in the season, but that shouldn't cost them if you win a conference championship.
One more season of things are the way they are, and then we get to go to 12.
And then we'll go to 16.
But that's a few years. That's another TV contract down the road.
That is true.
Some other games of note this weekend. Number one, Georgia played LSU. That game ended more or less about the way you would have expected it to. Georgia with a 50-30 win. Saw two of the more stranger plays in that game that I've seen in a long time. One was the blocked field goal.
But that's great presence of mind by Chris Smith.
Yes, it was.
It was just fascinating to me to watch that play in real time, to see that the LSU players literally jogging off the field and the Georgia players kind of standing around. Should he pick it up? Should he not pick it up? Yeah, I'm going to pick it up.
But if you watched Chris Smith, Chris was actually watching both the LSU players to see how they would respond and the movement of the football, because once the football stops moving, play is dead.
Right.
So Chris was watching to see if there was a chance, if he was to pick the ball up, then could he run straight? And he obviously ended up doing just that. But just how did the LSU players respond? They didn't. And so right at the end of the last possible movement of the football, that was when Chris Smith picked it up and he had a clean shot to go 95 yards for a score that it sent LSU wobbling for the wrong reason. You would have thought maybe it would have been something offensively that Georgia would have done. But it was a special teams play that set LSU back as the first marker in the game.
Yeah, because if that was the extra point, the ball's pretty much dead after it's blocked.
Right.
That was an impressive presence of mind, and it almost served as the backbreaker of the game because LSU could not really recover after that. Their heads were spinning. And
they got off to a good start. They was moving right down the field the first time they had the ball.
Right, and then after the field goal, it just kind of seemed like all the momentum went to Georgia. It was flat. LSU was flat. Look, I was impressed with Georgia. I mean, this is a championship team that have been there, done that, and we'll talk about them a little later when we get to playoffs.
Other championship games of note this weekend: the Michigan Wolverines took care of business, 43-22. Nice win over Purdue. They will enter the playoff as the number 2 seed, rightfully so, as they are undefeated this season, 13-0. Michigan, I give Michigan credit; they have played better pretty much each week. Doing just a little bit more each week. Donovan Edwards, 185 yards in this game, coming off his 200-plus yards against Ohio State the week before. And that more than makes up for the loss of Blake Corum for Michigan. They're going to be a tough out.
Yeah, they just plug right in, don't they? And you're right, Phil. Every time you see Michigan each week, they just seem to be hit another level. And we got to credit Jim Harbaugh and his staff for the years of building this, and this is what they've built toward, and the patience of Michigan to stick with the plan. And the plan right now looks fantastic. Michigan just had so much talent over Purdue. I like the makeup of the Purdue team. I like Jeff Brom a lot as a head coach, but they were limited on how many horses they had in the barn to go up against Michigan, and it showed in this game.
Yeah, and you just look at the numbers, and Michigan in and of itself, just look at the offense, and you look at Michigan, and I was trying to do the math here, and that's why my eyes kind of crossed. You see the steam coming out of my ears for those.
Oh boy.
386 yards of total offense for Michigan in this game.
Yeah.
Purdue threw for 366, and they ran for another 90, so that's 456 total. But once again, it's like, okay, so we're up and, we don't necessarily care. Yards can do whatever they want, but also you look at Michigan, it was 14-13. I give Purdue a lot of credit. They hung with them for a half and a little bit into the third quarter, but the adjustment by Michigan in the third and fourth quarter, 29-point second half, outscoring them 29-9 to win it by 21. So I'm begrudgingly giving Jim Harbaugh and his coaching staff credit for halftime adjustments, winning by 21.
They did that in the fact that they had a few more chunk plays in the game than Purdue. Purdue was amassing yards and putting together drives, but Michigan just always seemed to have 3 or 4 big plays that Purdue didn't have. And I credit Purdue too. They hung with them for a while. I love how physical the Boilermakers play, but again, they just got worn down, and Michigan just had some better skill players, and that's it. So Michigan's rolling right now.
An interesting game that really didn't have a whole lot of meaning in terms of impact on the playoff or
New Mexico
really for the
State,
major bowl games.
New Mexico State and Valparaiso?
Yeah. New Mexico State beating Valparaiso 65-3 to get themselves bowl eligible.
Yeah, buddy.
How about that?
This is where it matters for me.
I'd like to see what bowl the Aggies are going to.
Probably the New Mexico, maybe, you think?
So they can play in Albuquerque?
Yeah.
Considering how bad they've been over the last 5 to 10 years, I don't think they care.
No. I mean, you got to tip your hat to Jerry Kill and what they've been doing. I mean, they knock off Liberty, they blow out Liberty at home, and forced the Liberty fan base to usher their old coach. It's like, go to Auburn. When you have that happen to you at home, to New Mexico State, how many times have we said that in a sentence? But New Mexico State, bowl eligible at 6-6. This is where the fun is to me. After we go off the air and after this show is put to bed, when bowl season figures out how everybody else trickles down and falls into place after the CFP gets figured out and how the New Year's Six get figured out, that's the fun part for me. I want to see where UConn goes. I want to see where New Mexico State goes. I want to see where the guys that have been struggling, who finally make it to 500, who's going to the Bahamas, who's going to the insert.com bowl from here, those kinds of things. That's the fun part for me, that I can screw up my bowl pool.
And this just is a testament of Jerry Kill and what an outstanding coach he is. I mean, everywhere he's gone, and health issues have really plagued his career, but he wins. And if you can go to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and win and make the Aggies bowl eligible, that just puts a stamp of your approval of just the kind of coach you are. I met Jerry Kill when he was a high school coach in Webb City, Missouri, back in 1990. I think maybe it was earlier than that. That he had that football program consistently winning state championships in Missouri before he went on to his college opportunities. And you could just tell back then, this guy's special. And he's continued on. And if you can win in Las Cruces, you can win anywhere.
Yeah, if you ever wanted proof that a really good football coach can make an impact on a mediocre or bad program, there's your evidence right there. And we've got another one of those that we got to talk about here when we start talking about the carousel. But we'll get into that just in a couple of minutes. Really quick here before we get to halftime, other conference championship finals. ACC champs, the Clemson Tigers, they down North Carolina 39-10.
Did anybody watch that?
No.
I didn't either. That's sad.
Looks like that may be the beginning of the end of the DJ Ugalele era at Clemson.
Ugalele.
It has not been good the last tail end of this season. Second half of the season has not been good to DJU.
No. Tulane, your winners of the American Conference. Nice win for them, 45-28 over UCF. The Green Wave 11-2 on the season. They'll be going to a New Year's Six game. Your Sun Belt champs, Detroit Trojans, with a big win, 45-26 over Coastal Carolina, who will be losing their coach after this season.
Yeah.
Another conversation that we'll have in the second half of the show. Troy got up huge in this game. They were up 31-7 at the half and cruised to the win. Your Mountain West champs, the Fresno State Bulldogs, with a 28-16 win over Boise State. And I forgot the MAC champions. The Buffalo Bison. Is it the Bison?
Oh, the Saturday game.
Bulls.
That was the Friday game that made them bowl eligible. Go to the Saturday game, the noon kick with Toledo and Ohio U. Toledo, I think, won that one 17-7.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, your MAC Attack champs of the current season, the Toledo
Rockets.
17-7
winners over Ohio, and it definitely showed that it was a noon kick on a Saturday at Ford Field in Detroit.
In front of a crowd of friends and family.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty sluggish to watch that one, but a couple of shout outs. Tajay Spears for Tulane as the number 18 team, 199 yards for Tajay Spears and one long touchdown run for Willie Fritz in the Green Wave, who admitted that after that game he was going to go get him some beer. Not necessarily the Sam Pittman Cole beer, but a beer nonetheless. And I think Willie Fritz has earned that one. And then also for Troy in their win, Gunnar Watson on the day. I want to grab his numbers really quickly. 12 of 17 for 318. 12 completions, 318 yards, 3 touchdowns. Dominant performance for the graduate of Taylor County High School here in the state of Georgia and OSGHQ.
And your final Division I conference champion, the UTSA Roadrunners, 48-27. They beat North Texas. They too will be going on to a bowl game from here after finishing the season 11-2. Guys, that was a lot. Championship week is always a crazy week with some strange things happening. When we come back in the second half of the show, we really got a lot of ground to cover. Some bizarre coaching changes, some questionable coaching changes, and some good coaching changes.
Ain't kidding.
Plus, a look at the college football playoff and what can you expect here for the next couple of weeks as we wind through the month of December. All that more when we return for the second half of the College Football X. You are listening to the College Football X on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Please like and subscribe.
Please like and subscribe.
Hey, what's up? This is Darius Rucker. There are thousands of homeless veterans on the streets of our nation tonight. They're waiting for housing they are already approved for, but need the rental deposit to get into their home. Join VeteransMatter.org and help house 1,000 veterans as quickly as possible. Text VETS to 41444 and pledge any amount. Text VETS to 41444. They fought for us, now we fight for them. Veterans Matter.
Warning. Orthopedic surgeons are seeing an increase in overuse injuries when young athletes perform the same repetitive stressful motions over and over. Pitching, tennis, weight training, even long swimming workouts can cause overuse trauma that may require surgery. If your kids play and train hard, visit orthoinfo.org or stopsportsinjuries.org. A message from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine.
Lighten up, Francis.
Thanks for sticking around, folks and friends. We have made it to the second half of the show. You are listening to the College Football X here on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. He is OSG Wilkie. He is OSG Nelson. I am OSG Phil. We are but three of the vaunted online sports guys sports team, and we're talking college football. The first half of the show is all about conference championship weekend. And guys, before we get to the college football playoff, which basically is featuring very few surprises in terms of the teams that are in it, I want to talk a little bit about some coaching changes because there were some interesting moves here over the last couple of days. Mm-hmm. Probably the one that's going to get them, has already gotten and will continue to get the most publicity, is Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, leaving Jackson State after 3 seasons to head to Colorado.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm one of the few that likes the move.
Yeah.
If you're Colorado, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You know, who's the AD there? But he should be. Yes, that's right. I got to commend the guy because, look, Colorado hasn't been a factor since Bill McCartney was there in the 90s.
True.
So why not just, he's the hottest commodity out there. Everybody's talking about Deion Sanders going to the next level as a head coach. why not? Just here, I'm offering you, here's my package. You want to come to Boulder, come to Boulder. And he accepts. And I think it's a great move for Colorado. It gets them back on the map. Recruiting, we'll see. I mean, I think this is going to be a boon for recruiting. Look, Bill McCartney went to South Central LA and got those guys to come to Boulder, Colorado, get them out of that atmosphere. And I can't think of a better place to go from South Central to Boulder, Colorado. If you've been there, you know how beautiful it is there.
Oh yeah,
I've been there a few times.
It's certainly changing scenery.
But what it can do, look, Colorado's got some of the worst facilities in college football. Great stadium. I love Folsom Field. But facility-wise, they just haven't kept up with the other institutions. And this is a way to get some attention, maybe get the donor base to come around a little bit. And we'll see how successful he is as a head coach. He was successful at Jackson State. He knows how to market. And I think those are all pluses for Colorado. Now they're kind of saddled in being in the Pac-12. We don't know what the new version of the Pac-12 is going to be like, but I just think it's an excellent move by Colorado to bring Coach Prime in and get some PR flub, and it may help them as far as getting players, and we'll see how he coaches.
John, I got to bring up this question for you.
Yeah.
When he took the job at Jackson State, one of the things that Sanders had said quite a lot was he wanted to make the HBCUs relevant again in the world of college football.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But did he really accomplish that? And was this a bit of a sales job on his part?
I think that in his short time at Jackson State, he brought more attention to the HBCUs on the whole. I mean, specifically his program, but to the HBCUs than I think a lot of other individuals who've had the opportunity to did not in the past. And I think that all you've got to do is go back to National Signing Day last year. That to me is the microcosm of what Deion Sanders did for the HBCUs in the flip of Travis Hunter to Jackson State. And I think now that what you're seeing and what you're going to see is probably something of a pipeline from HBCUs to Colorado for the talent. And you're going to end up with a Western hub for HBCU talent because Coach Prime will be in Boulder at the University of Colorado. I think it's now incumbent upon the SWAC and the MEAC and the Division II schools in the HBCU to carry the mantle from here. I think that it was meteoric, and I think that now I just hope that Coach Prime is left alone to his devices. It's like, okay, you have given me an average of $4.5 million a year. We need to improve this. We need to do this. We need to do this. I hope that there's patience in Colorado so that Coach Prime can do, and notice I'm saying Coach Prime and not Deion, what Coach Prime can do for the elevation of the Colorado program. He needs to be left alone. He needs to be able to grow the program like he did in Jackson State in a very short period of time. Can he replicate that? That's another question for me.
Well, first of all, follow the Bill McCartney plan because it worked. And I think that's his strength. He'll be able to get those type of players to come to Colorado. As far as the HBCU schools, I think it's incumbent now on Eddie George at Tennessee State. Yep. He's the new big name in HBCU. He needs to be the face now of HBCU schools and continue what Deion Sanders started, which I think he will. I mean, Eddie George was kind of the second fiddle behind Deion Sanders in this effort. Now he's got to be the face of the effort. And I think the HBCU schools are much healthier now because of it and can take that baton and move forward. They're getting TV exposure and they're getting attention. And what's more, the NFL scouts have kind of rediscovered them as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the legacy that Deion Sanders has left with HBCU schools. He's got the scouts back on those campuses, and players are now starting to look more toward the HBCU schools as an option if they can't get into one of the big schools.
Got another coaching kind of almost a little bit like a bit of a chain reaction here. Auburn hires Hugh Freeze from Liberty.
Mhm.
Liberty hires Jamie Chadwell from Coastal Carolina. And Coastal Carolina hires North Carolina State's offensive coordinator. Might as well start with the big one, I guess in comparison to the other two. Hugh Freeze to Auburn. Does that fit just seem as awkward to you as it does to me? It almost smells like the same thing they just went through with Brian Harsin. I mean, I know Freeze had some success at Ole Miss, but at Auburn, I think he's going to be chewed up and spit out in 2 or 3 seasons. Am I wrong?
Depends on the kind of check that Jimmy Rain is comfortable to cut, and if that was to happen. I mean, frankly, this is an entire block on its own for another show, but I think that what you saw was something for Auburn University where they felt that they needed to make a splashy hire, meaning the folks behind the scenes, not necessarily the administration. This to me speaks more to booster influence than it does anything else, because if the past relationship between John Cohen at Mississippi State and Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss was anything, this would not have even been on the board, where Cohen was the one who was reporting Hugh Freeze to the SEC over what was going on that caused Hugh Freeze to be fired. And John Heim and everybody at AL.com and the Alabama Media Group did some great work in the past week, and this will be the required reading for everyone that wants to get the background on all of this, about all of the hoops that Auburn apparently felt comfortable in jumping through to say that Hugh Freeze was their guy. And I mean, hiring folks with level 1 violation. Basically, you're taking somebody that's a show cause in the conference and saying, here's why we want to hire this individual. This is, to me, square peg, round hole. This is something that should not have been done. And the fact that you don't make your athletic director available to the press the day of the press conference for Hugh Freeze to answer questions about why this individual, meaning Hugh Freeze, is DMing folks that are involved in a lawsuit with your university saying that you don't know who my athletic director is, and basically character assassinations on DMs. It was an out-of-control situation, and to me, it made zero sense that Hugh Freeze was hired with all of this background info that we saw. There might even be a groundswell of folks, and I doubt this would happen, but there's been a lot of folks on social media that are attached to the Auburn program that want nothing to do with Hugh Freeze as head coach. Nothing to do with it. So it'll be an interesting dynamic here in the offseason, but this is something that I don't think should have happened in the first place.
Wilkie?
How do I top that?
I kind of agree with John here. I'm not a big Auburn fan. I don't like the way that they churn through coaches, and they think that there's the people around that program seem to have this perception of them being something they may not necessarily be. But at the same time, they have so much potential there, and they can't get out of their own way.
They're the New York Mets of college football.
I know. I said that a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, they are.
I'd say college football's version of the New York Jets.
Yeah, that too.
You could argue that too. I mean,
well, where are you looking for or looking at when you let go of Brian Harsin? I mean, who was on your list? Every athletic director has a list.
I would have thought Cadillac would have been on your list for at least consideration, at least an elevation of duties, which he ended up getting with Hugh Freeze.
And
I totally believe that Lane Kiffin was on their list.
But Jimmy Sexton won that argument.
Oh yeah.
And is this the best you could get? I mean, is Auburn still the plum job out there among the coaching fraternity that we think it is? And is this the best you could get? And if you're Hugh Freeze, why do you want to be in that mess? You had something good going on at Liberty until, well, the last few weeks. But was it kind of forced on both parties? I mean, that's what it feels like to me. It feels like Auburn was forced to take Hugh Freeze, and Hugh Freeze was kind of forced to find another opportunity because maybe things had soured at Liberty. So
Yeah,
It just feels like a forced arrangement.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that exactly. I'm not sure how
Shotgun
successful it's going to
wedding.
be.
Yeah.
And we all know Hugh Freeze can coach. We all know he can recruit when he wants to recruit fairly. But we all know these things. I don't know. It just doesn't. It has a very strange feeling to me.
Yeah, it's got bad juju written all over it, Wilkie. It really does.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm an Auburn alum, and we know John is married to an Auburn alum.
Yes.
I would not be very comfortable with this.
They're not. Absolutely not. And
the second part of the tree here. Jamie Chadwell leaves Coastal Carolina to go to Liberty for a 7-year, $20 million contract.
Good for him.
Good on him. Yeah.
He deserves it.
It's a sideways move, but if you get $28 million out of the deal, more power to you.
Yeah, that's really at the end of the day, that's what it is.
If that's
it's a very sideways move. I wouldn't say necessarily that Liberty's on top of Coastal in the pecking order of things in college football right now. Mm-hmm. I guess they could be.
Well, they've got the facilities, they've got the money, and maybe if he's going to move on to another bigger job, he may have felt he's done all he can do at Coastal Carolina. It's time to get out of Myrtle Beach and move on. And Lynchburg, Virginia is not a bad landing spot when you're kind of, even if it is a lateral move, because if he can win there in a couple of years, an SEC job might open up for him. A Big Ten job might open for him. And I think that's kind of his goal, is to get one of those type of jobs.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, and that we've talked about this in earlier episodes when we were talking about coaching hot seats, I'm not so sure he would have been a better fit for Auburn than Hugh Freeze was.
I think that Jamie would have been a better fit, but then you could have also surrounded him with coordinators, and you get an up-and-coming coach who is more economically feasible, considering that your big-time boosters just cut a $15 million check. It would have been a lot less on their wallets. But to the boosters' points that we always see, they want to make the splashy hire. It's like they want to throw more money after money. And so, of course, that means it's like, okay, what's the biggest name we can get? Oh, let's go get Hugh Freeze. He was good at Ole Miss. And not pay attention to the issues that he had that made him leave Ole Miss, and the issues that he had at his previous employer. It's like focusing on shine. This is like either shiny object or squirrel right now. Like, oh, squirrel, and then you go and chase it. And that's what I'm afraid that they're staring at over there in Auburn right now. Boosters are panicking. The money people are panicking because of the season being what it was, and not staring at what you had with a guy like Cadillac Williams and Zach Etheridge and Trevon Reed and all of those players that, while they didn't have the coaching experience, they at least had the fabric and the fire and the emotion that you needed to help turn things around in that second half of the season.
And the final part of the tree here, North Carolina State offensive coordinator Tim Beck, your new head coach at Coastal Carolina, replacing Jamie Chadwell.
See, our dear friend Mark Harmon would love you in the circle that you've created here with this particular segment. Yeah, Wilkie, help me out on the NC State connection here.
Well, he was Dave Doran's offensive coordinator, and it sounds like to me Coastal had their guy already.
They were ready.
They already knew that this was because Jimmy Chatwell has been linked to a lot of these openings, so they were ready to move as soon as Coach Chatwell was getting ready to move, and so it doesn't surprise me. That was their guy. He's got a pretty good offensive mind. You saw what he did at State. So I think it's a good hire for Coastal. I guess the question is, can he keep the winning ways going? Because Coastal's done a great job the last few years of being on top, being that one of the always in contention for a Sun Belt title.
Yeah.
And the last of the moves that we'll talk about here in this show, in this particular episode of our show, your new head coach at the University of South Florida, former University of Tennessee offensive coordinator Dave Golesh, who basically was charged with running Josh Heupel's offense.
Now he's charged with running whatever offense South Florida has on hand.
Or coming up with one of his own.
Yeah.
That might be the better option.
South Florida was once considered a pretty solid program by Division I standards. They've really struggled the last few years.
And then
a run of some bad coaching hires, topped off by Jeff Scott, who recently was fired by the Bulls after winning, I think 3 games in 2 years.
Not pretty.
So fresh start for him, an opportunity to run his own program. We wish him the best of luck. Now, guys, we might as well get to the chase here. The thing that everybody's going to be talking about for the next 3 weeks or so.
Month and a half.
College football playoff time. College football playoff time. We know who the Fab Four are. Your top seed, the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 2, Michigan. Number 3, TCU. And number 4, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty good year for the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Return.
Really the only 2 powerhouse programs in the Big Ten. Both made it. Ohio State was absolutely waxed by Michigan just about a week ago. Their only loss of the season, but that was enough to still get them into the playoff despite a less than stellar strength of schedule this year. But really, would you have taken them 4th? Does that make sense to you? Or is there somebody else out there that could have laid claim to that number 4 spot?
If you're looking at teams like Alabama and Tennessee, the answer is no, because that's 5 and 6. So for me, it's like, no, that 4 is what it should be. And of course, what you want to do if you were the CFP, because as we all know, they do what's best for business, is that you stagger your teams in the B1G, don't put them back to back. And so that way, the only way
exactly what they did.
Yeah. And so that way you don't have them meeting in an opening round game. So if you want to have that Michigan-Ohio State rematch, you wait until the last game of the CFP instead of doing it in the first round, where you have the University of Georgia going up against your 4. So that way you've staggered your team with the conference with the 2 teams in it. And this year it just so happens to be the B1G.
Yeah, I, for one, would love to see Michigan Ohio State play at SoFi for the championship game. I think that would just put college football off the charts and would be equivalent to Georgia and Alabama playing for the national championship in Indianapolis. I don't think anything can top when they played it here in Atlanta, unless this game was in Detroit.
True.
But to me, I would be watching, that'd be appointment television for me. Now we got to deal with some realism here. The realism to me is Georgia and Michigan have proved that they're the 2 best teams in college football right now.
Right.
And they've gotten better and better each day. And they're made up so differently. I love the Ohio State Georgia matchup. I really do. I think that's definitely appointment television.
Take
I think
over.
Yeah, exactly. Take the over on this one, because you've got some just players out there. You've got players, and you've got NFL talent out there. I mean, majority of these guys we're going to see playing on Sunday and probably in the NFL playoffs in a few years. So this, to me, is just an outstanding matchup. And Michigan and TCU also intrigues me too. Seeing Max Duggan going up against a Big Ten type defense that's got some players on it that can probably a little more talented than Kansas State. Kansas State was so physical and was able to get in Duggan's face. And I see that the same scenario with Michigan. And this is where TCU's receivers, who I think are the best in the country right now, just by the fact that they can catch the ball and get yards after the catch. This is where they've got to assert themselves, because I don't think it's going to be an easy ride for that TCU offense. But I love the matchup. But if I got to go realistically here, Yeah, I'd love to see Ohio State, Michigan play, and it's possible. But Georgia, to me, just seems like playing in a different level. But again, they're facing an Ohio State team that's just full of NFL prospects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the other interesting things about the Georgia-Ohio State matchup, along with the fact that it's going to probably be a track meet, and while Georgia may be a better team, Ohio State's the one program that can match them athlete for athlete.
Mm-hmm.
The game's going to be played in Atlanta at the Peach Bowl.
Check.
Smidge of a home field advantage there.
Yeah.
And I say that with complete and utter sarcasm because, as we all know, we're sitting in the Metro Atlanta area, and it's about a 70-mile drive from Athens to downtown Atlanta.
And the secondary market will be flooded with Georgia Bulldog dollars. I mean, yes, you're going to have the allotments going to both schools to make it somewhat fair with the amount of fans that go to these games. Fair. But no, the secondary market will be flooded by UGA money to try to make that as much of a home field advantage outside of the ticket allotments as possible.
But I don't think it's a much home field advantage at all for Georgia because, they played the championship game there. They're familiar with the surroundings. Ohio State they could play this game anywhere, and they could play it at Sanford Stadium. And I think Ohio State would still be, I don't think it would affect them at all. And there's going to be a lot of scarlet and gray in that stadium because you're just talking about the Metro Atlanta. There's a lot of Ohio State alums in Metro Atlanta. So
correct.
They're going to buy tickets, which is going to bring the secondary market up quite a bit. So I don't see a home field advantage here for Georgia at all. I just think this is the type of matchups we need to see more in the college football playoff. We've gotten the same teams the last 4 or 5 years. It's good to see a couple of newbies in there and seeing a colossal matchup like this one.
Why would you want variety in a tournament?
Yeah, no kidding.
Come on, man.
It was interesting to me seeing over the last 24 hours as we record this on a Sunday afternoon, after the TCU loss, people thinking there was going to be a conspiracy afoot to get Alabama into the Final Four, so to speak.
They tried.
But that was nowhere to be found. Why we all think there's always a conspiracy afoot when it comes to who gets picked to do what when it comes to college football and bowl money and things like that. At the end of the day, these are the 4 teams that needed to be here. It's going to make for what should be a pretty interesting playoff and one that we'll have to remember because after this year, guys, we got one more year of the semifinals and then the finals, and then it goes to a 12-team playoff.
Support your local bowl game.
Because they're about to go, the bowl games as you know it, and we grew up with back in the bygone era, those are gone. They will never, ever be the same. 2024-25 season begins the 12-team college football playoff tournament. Something I'd like to see, I think in the long haul, it's going to be the best thing that the game ever did. It will open up the doors to a lot more teams that haven't had a chance to compete. And on any given Saturday, as much as we like to think that Georgia or the Alabama or the Michigan or the Ohio State or whomever, they're the kings of the college football world. On a given Saturday, a good team playing the right game could beat them, and that's all it takes. You don't seem impressed.
I think it brings in the automatic bid.
Yeah,
and this is where K-State and Utah would have benefited by winning their conference championship and getting the bid into the playoff and having a shot at a national championship. So, but I caution people, this is not going to be like the NCAA tournament. You're not going to have the 15 upsetting the 2 or the 3 upsetting the 14. If there's a Sun Belt SEC matchup, it's not going to happen. You're not going to see a low seed be able to beat a top seed from a Power 5 conference. But what you hope to get are good games and great matchups. And I commend the committee this year for doing that. I think we've got one colossal matchup in the semifinal and one I'd like to see, because I think it'll be a great test for TCU. But once it's expansive, don't expect something like the NCAA tournament.
Think about this for a minute, guys. Number 10 or number 11 Utah, after winning the Pac-12 championship, makes it into the tournament, and they take on number 2 Ohio State. I wouldn't guarantee Ohio State beats them.
Although I think it'd be very tough because that game would be at the Horseshoe.
Mm-hmm.
And the Horseshoe in December, I'm sure, is not very accommodating.
The top 4 seeds not get the top 4 seeds get buys and do not get to host a game.
So you're assuming that Utah moved on.
I'm just saying, Utah, Ohio State on a neutral field.
I still think Ohio State
in a
wins that
hypothetical
game.
12-game playoff. I'm not saying that Utah would beat them, but I'd be really interested to see those two teams play.
Well, it would be competitive. Yes, it would be competitive. But again, you're not factoring in the fact that Utah had to play the week before and could have gotten banged up in the process. I mean, that's the one reason that I'm not big on speculating like this, is because you just don't know if Utah is in that first round game. Yeah, they get the win, but their key running back may have been banged up, and it's probably 75% against Ohio State. Those are those factors that just never weigh in when you talk about these things. So that's why I'm reluctant to go that far. But yeah, you want to see these type of matchups in a neutral site. And once we get the first round that are played on campus sites, and quite honestly, I would much rather see these games up until the championship game played on campus sites, because I think the crowd will be better, and the travel costs for at least one side of it wouldn't be as much. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out when they go to 12 and start playing more neutral site games, because who can travel to 3 neutral site games in a row? I mean, it's just hard to do, and it's expensive.
Yep, no doubt.
Yeah, if you're an executive of a committee getting paid a crap ton of money to make decisions about who does what in the world of college football, yeah, you can afford to go from place to place because your expenses are partially paid. But see about somebody who just graduated from a university and is making enough money to get by and get started, or a current college student, can see that happening.
Yep.
Guys, we've talked about a bunch. We covered a bunch of ground today. What do you say we wrap things up this week?
Let's wrap things up, and I cannot wait for the bowl games to show themselves. It looks like there's some intriguing matchups in some of the early bowl games, if you are so inclined to watch them as a part of your early pre-Festivus viewing. There might be some good ones out there, so we'll see. We'll cover.
The only thing matters is 15 practices.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say we make next week's show part 1 of the bowl game previews?
The bowl game previews.
And
bowl
then
game extravaganza?
Yes.
Yep. Bowlapalooza.
Yeah.
Bowlamania. Whatever other hyperbole you want to use.
Well,
bowling for swag?
You're bowling for swag?
We'll talk about that, though, when it comes up next week. In the meantime, thanks for listening, everybody. Hopefully you learned a little bit. We certainly learned a little bit. For OSG Wilkie, for OSG Nelson, I'm OSG Phil. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you will stick with us. Like, subscribe, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or any of those other social media thingies that are legitimate. Thanks again. Have a great week, everybody. We will talk to you again, hopefully, next week on the College Football X.
Please like and subscribe.
Bye.